Assalamualaikum and good morning to one and all. Today we'll study about part 3 of pharmacoepidemiology. So before going ahead, let's quickly see what we have studied in part 2 of this chapter. So part 2 of this chapter, we have studied about two important design of pharmacoepidemiological study. First was case control study and second was analysis of the secular trend. And in this design, we have seen how we can establish relationship between the disease and exposure of the drug. It means how this type of design help you to establish or to correlate between what adverse effect it is produced by the drug or what disease it is produced by the drug. So we have seen the nice example of oral contraceptive and venous thrombosis which was happen in different type of population, especially the female who is taking this oral contraceptive, and we have seen their different example by which we can identify their correlation. I am Professor Sheikh Abu Sufyan. Welcome you to my YouTube channel Pharma Learning Forever. At the end of this e-learning session, you are able to discuss cohort studies of pharmacoepidemiology and explain statistical methods of analyzing case control and cohort studies. So let's start with the cohort studies. So the cohort studies, these are identify subset of a defined population. So what you are doing in case of cohort study, so first thing when you want to do the cohort study, you need to identify subset of defined population on which you are going to perform this study. So you are going to identify that subset of defined population. Followed by that, you are going to follow them over a time. It means these population that you have identified to whom you are giving the medicine. So there is one group of population to whom you are giving the medicine and another group of population to whom you are not giving the medicine. So those to whom you have given the medicine are called as exposed population. So we'll be using this terminology going ahead. So those who are taking the medicine or exposed to the drug are called as exposed population, and those to whom that particular medicine under study it is not given, it is called as unexposed population. Okay, so you have both the population to whom medicine it is given and to whom medicine it is not given. And now what you are doing, you are taking continuous follow-up of them for over the time. So over a period of time you are taking the follow-up, you are taking the information, is there any adverse effect they are suffering from, is there the symptom and sign of symptom of the associated disease they suffering from. So you are taking their follow-up over time. Okay, so when after that you need to take the follow-up and then you need to observe the difference in their outcome. So what will be the difference in the outcome to whom medicine it is given, it means exposed population, and what is the outcome difference in the population to whom medicine it is not given or unexposed population. So you are comparing exposed population to unexposed population, the drug to whom drug it is given and to whom drug it is not given. So you are observing the difference in their outcome. So once you observe the difference in their outcome, now whatever data it is being generated, that data it clearly indicates that the disease it is produced or adverse effect it is, if at all if it is produced by the drug, it is only due to the drug because that was not observed in case of unexposed population to whom drug it is not given. It is only seen in case of those people to whom drug it is given, and it is not observed in the second group to whom drug it is not given. So now you can make the statement that the so and so adverse effect it is related to particular medicine. Like in case of from first day onward, we are taking same example so that you can understood different type of the study, that is oral contraceptive and venous thrombosis. So now there is one group to whom you have given oral contraceptive, another female group to whom you have not given oral contraceptive, maybe you have given some other kind of contraceptive like the loop contraceptive. So one population taking oral contraceptive, another population taking loop contraceptive, and now if venous thrombosis if it is produced only in case of those to whom oral contraceptive is given, it clearly indicates that venous thrombosis it is related to oral contraceptive. So now your assumption that you have started from the case report, then you have studied about the case control study, then you have studied the analysis of secular trend. So all those assumptions now going to confirm in case of the cohort study. So the cohort study, it is the mostly the confirmatory study. Now let's see what are the uses of cohort study. So cohort study, it is used to compare the exposed patient to unexposed patient. Obviously, because we are using two type of population, the one group to whom we are given the drug and another group to whom we have not given the drug. So it will help you to compare the outcome in case of exposed patient and outcome in case of unexposed patient, and that you can clearly compare. Okay, so that is one of the use. Another use is that they can also be used to compare one exposure to another exposure. So what could be one exposure to another exposure? Like in case of exposed patient and unexposed patient, the one patient to whom drug it is given, okay? Whereas unexposed patient are those to whom drug is not given. So here you are not given the drug, okay? But in case of the second example, that is the one exposure to another exposure, it means the one group it is being given with the oral contraceptive, and other group they might have given with another type of contraceptive, maybe the loop contraceptive. Okay, so they have been given with the loop contraceptive. So this is called as one exposure, and second one it is another exposure. So this is the benefit in case of the cohort study, whereas that is not the case in case of case control study. Okay, so let's see one of the example of the case study by which I will try to make you understand what is the meaning of the cohort study. So the case one, here we are comparing the women of the reproductive age who use oral contraceptive to user of other contraceptive methods. So it is related to the B use, the use that is related to this, the second use, right, where we have compared one exposure to another exposure. So one group of the women, they were given with the oral contraceptive, another group of the women, they were given with the other contraceptive method, and it was observed that the difference in the frequency of venous thromboembolism. So venous thromboembolism, it is more in case of oral contraceptive as compared to other contraceptive method. So this outcome, it clearly indicates that the venous thromboembolism, it is only due to oral contraceptive. It may not happen in case of other contraceptive methods. So now you can reach to the conclusion. So assumption that you have framed in case of first type of design, that is the case report, then you have studied in case of case control, analysis of secular trend. Now you are going to confirm that in case of cohort study. So you have multiple options in case of the cohort study. So this is the use. Let's see the result of this. So what could be the result? So the relationship between oral contraceptive and the thromboembolism was noted earlier using analysis of secular trend and case control study. So now these the relationship was noted in those study, right? It was not confirmed. So now those relationship, it is confirmed after cohort study. So after cohort study, you can conclude that the thromboembolism, it is related to oral contraceptive. Whereas in case of analysis of secular trend, you can only say it might be due to or it may be due to, because you do not have the data related to both exposed as well as unexposed study in case of analysis of secular trend, because that data you have taken from the medical report, or this is the retrospective study. So due to that, you have the limitation in case of secular trend and case control study. So now with the help of cohort study, you can confirm your assumption and reach to the conclusion. Okay, so this could be the good result of the cohort study. Let's see what are the different type of cohort study. So there are two types of cohort study. The first type of cohort study, it is called as the prospective study. Now what do you mean by prospective study? It is the study which is conducted simultaneously with the event under the study. Now what do you mean by simultaneous study? So in prospective study, there is one group to whom you are giving the medicine, another group to whom you have not given the medicine. Now both the group, it is there, and those group you are simultaneously doing the observation. So this is the present study. This is the current study. Okay, so that is called as the prospective study. So the important way you can remember prospective study is, it is this ongoing current study, it is called as the prospective study. Second study, it is the retrospective study. What is retrospective study? It is conducted after the event by recreating the past event. Now how you are going to recreate past event? So to recreate past event, you need to use the medical record, you need to use the questionnaires, and you need to take the interview of the physician, like what is your opinion, what is your experience with the oral contraceptive, right? So this type of study, it is called as the retrospective study. So in case of retrospective study, the patient already suffered from adverse effect, right? Now you are trying to establish relationship between that adverse effect and the medicine. Okay, so by using the medical record, maybe patient is already died due to venous thromboembolism, and now with the help of medical record, you are digging out, you are mining the data, and you are trying to establish relationship between oral contraceptive and venous thromboembolism, right? So easy to remember is the prospective study, it is the current study, right? It is ongoing study, it is happen in presence, right? Retrospective study, the patient already suffered from adverse effect. Here patient is not suffer from adverse effect. You are giving the medicine and you are observing that patient, and you see whether the patient suffer from adverse effect or not. Whereas in case of retrospective study, patient is already suffer from adverse effect. Now all those patients who suffer from venous thromboembolism, you check their medical record. Does they have taken oral contraceptive or not? You are taking the interview of the physician, that those patients who is die, does you have prescribed them oral contraceptive, right? So if that is the case, it is called as the retrospective study. So in the simple way, the prospective studies are happening in a present, or it is the current ongoing study. Retrospective study, you are recreating past event using medical record, questionnaires, or the interview. Okay, so these are the two types of cohort study that you can conduct. The different what now let's see what is the difference between cohort and case control study. So in last lecture we have studied the case control study, and today we are studying the cohort study. Let's see what is the difference between these two type of design of epidemiological studies. So first it is that is the case control study. So the basically the difference, it is depend on the basis on which patient are recruited into the study. How patients are recruited into the study, so that is the major difference. So in case of case control study, the patient are recruited on the basis of presence or absence of the disease. So those patients who are suffer from venous thromboembolism due to oral contraceptive, now you are recruiting all those patients. So they are already suffering from the disease, and now since they are suffering from the disease, now you are looking for antecedent exposures, whether they are exposed to drug or they are not exposed to the drug, whether they are taking specific medicine, if they are taking specific medicine, does that medicine producing same disease in other population or not. So that you study in case of case control studies. Whereas in case of cohort study, that is not the case. So you are recruiting patient in cohort study on the basis of presence or absence of exposure. Now they are not suffering from disease in case of cohort study. Now you just recruit the patient and to whom you are giving the medicine, and another group to whom you are not giving the medicine. So you are recruiting the patient on the basis of the presence or absence of the exposure, and their subsequent disease course, it is then studied. So there is one of group, they are already taking oral contraceptive, and another group, they are not taking oral contraceptive. So you are recruiting them on the basis of that. So there are 100 patients taking oral contraceptive, 100 patients they are not taking oral contraceptive. Now based on that, you are observing those patients, right, and see is there any disease they produce, and is there any difference between these two groups. So that is done in case of the cohort study. So very simple, the difference on the basis of patients are recruited. In case of case control study, you must remember they are recruited on the basis of the disease they suffered, whereas in case of cohort study, they are recruited on the basis of the patient who are taking the medicine and patient who are not taking the medicine. So patient who are taking the medicine are called as the presence of exposure, and patient who are not taking the medicine are called as absence of the exposure. right? So this is how you can differentiate cohort study and case control studies. I hope it is clear to you. Now let's see what is the use of this. So the cohort studies are particularly useful when one is studying multiple possible outcomes from single exposure. Like the oral contraceptive they are producing the one disease, it is venous thromboembolism. Other disease could also be possible with the oral contraceptive, right? So now you are looking for the multiple possible outcome from single exposure, so that is feasible with the help of the cohort study. The second use it is especially in case of post marketing surveillance. So the post marketing surveillance, the drug it is already launched into the market now, the physician had started prescribing that medicine. Now when you have conducted clinical trial, maybe you have studied that drug in very less number of population and you may not have recognized the side effect, right? But when in the drug it is launched into the market, now physician will start prescribing that drug to the large number of population. Now all those to whom drug it is prescribed and all those to whom drug it is not prescribed, after launching drug into the market, right, now you can keep the observation and see is there any common adverse effect it is seen in case of those patients to whom drug it is being prescribed, right? So it is useful in post marketing drug surveillance studies which are looking at any possible effect of a newly marketed drug. So the cohort study it is very good design to study the drug after post marketing of the drug or for post marketing drug surveillance. Okay, so this is the use of the cohort study. Now let's see what are the limitation of cohort study. Although we have seen it is a confirmatory study, it is the most advanced study as compared to all earlier design that we have studied, but still there are certain limitation of the cohort study. So the first limitation is it requires extremely large sample size to study relatively uncommon outcome. Now do remember that uncommon outcome it is not seen in every patient. Maybe happen that in case of penicillin you have seen the skin rashes which is produced by penicillin, it is not seen in all the patient. It is seen in case of only those patients who have allergy to the penicillin. So it is very less, the percentage it is just 2 to 3%, right? Now to recognize this 2 to 3%, you need to give medicine to the large sample size. Then only you can able to recognize that there are patients who having or who might have produced allergy to the penicillin, right? So it requires extremely large sample size to study relatively uncommon outcome. So this is one limitation. Second limitation could be the prospective cohort studies, which are currently ongoing study, can require prolonged time period to study delayed drug effect, because there are many drugs which doesn't produce as instant effect, which produces the delay effect. Now if you want to study those delayed drug effect, then obviously you need to conduct the study for prolonged time period. So these are very what we'll say the tedious study. It take more time to understand the delayed drug effect by using the cohort study. So these are two important limitations of the cohort study. So we are done with first part of the session. Now let's have some question and answer session, and then I will be move on to the next part of the session. So my first question is, what are two types of cohort studies? So we have seen the two types of cohort study. Just enlist what are those two type of the cohort study. Now let's see who give the first answer. Yes, I'm waiting for your answer. So I can see the Nurun Nisa Sheikh given the answer, that is the prospective and retrospective study. Saqib has given the answer, Abdul Hafiz, Altaf Siddiqui. What about others? I hope you all are listening to the session. Safa, Dilshad. Okay. Aksa Qazi. Okay, so there are two type of study, that is prospective and retrospective. So prospective, these are the ongoing current study, and retrospective, which is related to past events which are already happened, and now you are recreating that if those events by using the medical report or the interview or the questionnaires. With the help of that you can conduct the survey and you can try to find out correlation between the drug and the disease. Okay, so these are the two different type of the studies. My second question is, give difference between cohort and case control study. So we have seen the major difference between cohort and case control study. Now just let me know what is that difference between cohort and case control study. Yes, so let's see who give the answer, the difference between cohort and case control study. Yes, I'm waiting for your answer. So there are some students who are giving very delay answer. That is not fair. That indicate that you are just copy pasting the answer of someone else and then on that you are adding into the chat box. Yes. So nice to see again Nurun Nisa. She is always first to give the answer. She has mentioned that in cohort, patients are recruited on the basis of presence or absence of the disease. Okay, so we are recruiting patient in case of cohort study on the basis of presence or absence of disease. Sorry, I think you have written wrong answer. Where we recruit patient on the basis of presence and absence of the disease, it is called as case control study. Okay, whereas in case of cohort study, we are recruiting the patient especially on the basis of exposure or non-exposure or presence or absence of the disease. Okay, so AXA has given the right answer. The core study you are recruited on the basis of presence and absence of the disease. So case control study you are recruiting the patient on the basis of the disease, right? Wherein in case of the cohort study you are recruiting the patient on the basis of presence or absence of exposure, whether those patients who are taking the drug or those patients who are not taking the drug. So exposure means they are taking the drug. Okay, so this is the basis for which recruitment of the patient in case of cohort and case control study. So on that basis you can distinguish between these two study design. My last question is, what are limitation of the cohort study? What are the limitation of the cohort study? Now let's see who give the answer. Limitation of cohort study. Yes, I am waiting for your answer in the chat box. Okay, so one limitation mentioned by Nurun Nisa, it is the required large sample size. Okay, so the large sample size, it is the important limitation of the cohort study. Okay, so especially to study uncommon outcome, we need the large sample size. So that is the very important limitation of the cohort study. And second important limitation mentioned by the Nurun Nisa, it take long time, especially to study the delayed drug effect. So this is the second uh, limitation of the cohort study. So we have seen two limitation. One, it is the large sample size. So you need to do this study in case of the many patients. So that is one problem. Second problem is that it take more time to study the delay effect of the drug. So that is the second limitation of the cohort study. So I have done with the Q&A session, which is related to first part. Let's move on to the next part of the session, that is the analysis of the case control and cohort study. Now how you are doing the analysis, on what basis you are reaching to the conclusion, how you are processing the data. So that is very important part in case of any epidemiological study. This is called as the application of the statistics or the statistical method in case of analyzing the data that you have received from epidemiological study, because we have seen in cohort study you have getting large amount of the data, Case control study, you have getting large amount of data. Likewise, in case of analysis of secular trend, that is only you are dealing only with the data, right? So when you are processing all this data, you need to apply the statistic to reach to certain conclusion. Now let's see how you are applying this statistic. So in case of both case control and cohort studies, it will provide the same basic information. Okay, so the basic information that you have receiving from both kind of study, that is case control and cohort study, it is the same. So you are getting the same basic information, but the difference is how this information it is collected. So that is important difference. So the first we have seen the difference that on the basis of the disease you are collecting the data in case of case control study, and here in case of cohort study you are collecting the data on the basis of exposure and unexposure, right? So that is one thing. Second thing, how you are processing this data, so that also matters. Now let's see how it is differed from case control and cohort study. So the first important parameter that you can measure, it is the relative risk. Okay, so the key statistic reported from these studies is the relative risk. So basically the relative risk, it is a very important, rather the key statistic that is reported from the cohort study. Now let's see what is relative risk. So the relative risk, it is basically the ratio of the incident rate of an outcome. So that is very important. It is the incident rate of outcome in exposed group to the incident rate of the outcome in unexposed group. Now how you will define in terms of one exposure to another exposure, because we have seen the cohort study either exposure to you are comparing exposed group to unexposed group, or you are comparing one exposure to another exposure. So if in case of another exposure, if you want to define relative risk, then it is the incident rate of an outcome in exposed group or in one exposed group to the incident rate of outcome in the another exposed group. Now what do you mean by incident rate of outcome? Now in case of oral contraceptive, in case of cohort study, we have seen the group of population taking oral contraceptive, group of population they are taking the loop contraceptive as a method. So they have used loop contraceptive instead of oral contraceptive. And what was the outcome? The outcome was the venous thromboembolism. It is more in case of oral contraceptive. So the incident rate of the venous thromboembolism, it is more in that is oral contraceptive as compared to the incident rate of the venous thromboembolism in case of loop contraceptive, right? So what is this? So this is the relative risk. It is more in case of the oral contraceptive and it is less in case of the other method of the contraceptive, right? Now let's try to understand this in case of the quantitative term. Now how, with the help of just number, how you can identify the risk, right? So it is called a statistical interpretation of relative risk. Now you have only statistical data, that is the relative risk it is more than 1, relative risk it is equal to 1, or relative risk it is less than 1. Now what this information indicate? Now let's see that. Okay, so for example, if relative risk if it is greater than 1, so if that is the case, then it indicates that the exposed subject, means those to whom you have given the drug, have greater risk of the disease, means have greater risk of venous thromboembolism than unexposed subject, okay, to whom you have not given the medicine. So if the relative risk if it is greater than 1, so this clearly indicates that the exposed subject are at high risk. So they are having more risk of the disease as compared to unexposed subject. Okay, so this is in case of the relative risk which is greater than 1. Second case could be the relative risk of equal to 1. Okay, so if relative risk is equal to 1, so this indicates that the exposed subjects to whom you have given the medicine and unexposed subject to whom you have not given the medicine have the same risk of developing the disease. If that is the case, so that you can return in the form of relative risk is equal to 1. Okay, now let's see what is the relative risk less than 1. So it is just inverse of the A case where the exposed subject have the low risk of the disease as compared to unexposed subject. So this is something the group which is desirable. You want to continue with the medicine when it show that the exposed subject, those who are taking medicine, has the low risk as compared to those to whom you have not given the medicine. If that is the case, then such medicine can continue into the market. Now, if this is the case, then you can discontinue such drug into the market. Got it? So on the basis of this statistical data, you will do the interpretation of the relative risk, and you can take decision whether to continue that drug in the market or to discontinue that drug into the market, or if those drug can be given as a last sort of the option or the last choice drug for the treatment of any kind of the disease. So that decision can be taken on the basis of this important statistic. So we have seen the relative risk. But now problem it is with the case control study, because in the case control study you are looking for very rare disease, right? And you select the patient on the basis of the disease where they are already suffering from or not, right? So you are not aware that how many patients they are suffer from the disease, right? So in case control study, one cannot determine the size of either exposed population or the unexposed population, because the patient are recruited on the basis of the disease they are suffering from. Now you are not aware whether that disease patient suffering from it is only due to the drug, or it is due to the natural reason, or it is due to the natural cause, or he might have some other reason for the disease that he might suffer from, right? So you cannot determine the size of either exposed population or unexposed population. So in such cases, relative risk cannot be calculated directly from the case control study, or if you are calculating that by using case control study, that data will not give you valid the interpretation. Okay, so now in such case the relative risk it is of no use. So in case of case control study, you are not using relative risk. Now let's see what we can use in case of case control study, or what could be the solution for this problem. So while reporting the result of the case control study, so if you are studying case control or you are using the case control study as a method or the design of epidemiological study, then in such case one generally report the odd ratio. So instead of relative ratio or relative risk, you can calculate the odd ratio. Now what is the odd ratio? So the odd ratio, it is an estimate of relative risk when disease under the study it is relatively rare. Now out of those who are exposed to the drug or they are suffering from the disease, how many of them they are taking oral contraceptive, right? So they are suffer from relatively rare disease, that is venous thromboembolism. So how many of them they have taken oral contraceptive? So we have seen very good example. Out of the 50 women who are suffer from venous thromboembolism, it was observed that 30 of them they were taking oral contraceptive. Now this case it indicate it is the odd ratio. Not all the women, only 30 they are suffering from the venous thromboembolism. So it is not what we say straightforward ratio, it is called as the odd ratio, right? So you can use odd ratio to interpret the data in case of the case control study. So in addition to that, we have seen the relative risk, we have seen the odd ratio that is used in case of case control study. Another statistic, or that rather which is very important, it is called as the p-value, and you might have studied this in biostatistics subject. What do you mean by p-value? So it basically indicate how much statistical difference it is there in between the two group. Okay, so whether you say that there is the difference between the exposed group and unexposed group, but now how much it is statistically significant, that you can calculate by p-value. So both relative risk and odd ratio can be reported with the p-value. So it allows to determine whether relative risk or maybe the odd ratio, they are statistically significantly different from 1.0 value or not. Okay, so if they are statistically significant, suppose if they are having the value of 1, it means there is no much difference. But if the value of it is coming less than 1, maybe 0.5, so 0.5 it the 1 indicate no statistical significant difference. But if it is the 0.5, it indicate the statistically significant difference, right? So as this value it is decreased, it indicate more statistically significant difference. So 1, there is no statistically significant difference. 0.5, it indicates statistically significant difference. Now if it is 0.0, it is coming to 0.05, right? So that indicate the more statistically significant difference, and if it is coming to like something like 0.001, that indicate that it having highly significant statistical difference between the two group, that is exposed group and unexposed group. Okay, so as the p-value it is decreased, that indicate more and more statistical difference. If it is equal to 1, it indicate the less statistical difference. So this is the third statistic we are using, it is called as the p-value. The fourth statistic we are using, which is another important statistics and commonly used statistic rather, it is called as confidence interval. So you can use either p-value or you can use the confidence interval. Now it is preferably the confidence interval, preferably the relative risk and odd ratio can be reported with the confidence interval. So you are using p-value as a one indicator, another indicator can be a confidence interval. Now what is confidence interval? It is an indication of the range of relative risk within which the true relative risk for the entire theoretical population is most likely to lie. Now what do you mean by true risk? So the true risk, it is the real relative risk, right? So now you are confident that whatever risk or relative risk is there, it is the true relative risk. Now depending upon the statistic you have applied, you will get value, either it is 90%, 100% or 95%. So now let's see one example. Suppose if your confidence interval, if it is coming to 95%, a 95% confidence interval, it indicates that we can be 95% confident that the true relative risk lies in the range, isn't it? Likewise, if it is 90%, it means you are less confident. So 95% you are more confident, right? Likewise, if you get value which is close to 100, that indicate that you are much more confident that the true relative risk that lies in this range, it is sure and it is correct. Okay, so here you are using the statistic. I am not going into the mathematical parts, I am not going into the formulas that you have already studied in the biostatistics. If not, then you can just go back, Google out, and you will get the idea how to calculate confidence interval, how to calculate the p-value, then relative risk we have seen, and odd ratio we have seen the definition. Okay, so this is about the confidence interval. Now another parameter, it is the excess risk. So there are some case studies or there are some epidemiological study where you are using excess risk as a statistical indicator to interpret your result. Now what do you mean by excess risk? So if there is increase in a risk, okay, so the excess risk also called as the risk difference or attributable risk. Okay, so what is the risk or the same problem which is happen in the two group of population, one having the less age, another having the more age, one who are the cigarette smoker, another who are not cigarette smoker. So the same problem with the different perspective, right? So does there is increase in the risk with the cigarette smoking? Does there is increase in the risk of the same disease with the same medicine with advanced age? If that is the case, that indicator that you are identifying, it is called as the excess risk. Okay, so it is more important in considering public health impact of an association. So association means the relationship between different factors that you are correlating. So when you are doing this, it represents increased rate of the disease due to the exposure. Okay, so now let's try to understand this. Maybe this is the theoretical slide that I have put. Maybe you have not understand what is excess risk. Let's see the example and try to understand what is excess risk. Okay, so the case study where the people given with the oral contraceptive, the women they are given with the oral contraceptive are strongly associated with development of myocardial infarction in the young woman. So they are given with the oral contraceptive and there was strong correlation between the oral contraceptive and myocardial infarction in the young woman. Okay, now let's see how this can be interpreted by using excess risk. Okay, now there are two cases. The first case, it is the risk of myocardial infarction in case of non-smoking women. So study can be conducted on the non-smoking women and those who are in their 20s. 20 means they are very adult. Okay, so their age is just 20. Okay, so the risk of myocardial infarction in non-smoking women in their 20s, when it was studied, it was observed that it is so low that even fivefold increase in that risk, mean if you can fivefold increase this risk, it will still not be a public health importance. What it indicate, so those women who are non-smoker and if their age it is 20 years or below the 20 years, they are having the less risk of the myocardial infarction with oral contraceptive, right? So this is in case of relative risk. Okay, now let's try to understand what could be excess risk. We'll take second case, right? In contrast to this, the woman in their age of 40. Now here you did this study in those women who having the age of 20s. Now here you are doing the study with the woman who having the age of 40 and those who are cigarette smoker. So the advanced age, so age is more and they all are cigarette smoker. So when you did study in this population, it was observed that there is very high risk, and due to this high risk, rather it is called as excess risk. Okay, so that we are trying to understand. It is called as the excess risk. Okay, and due to this excess risk, so there is some figure for excess risk, there is some number for excess risk. Due to that number, it indicates that the oral contraceptive should not be used in these women. So since there are relative risk, it is less in case of those women having it who having the age of 20 or below the 20 and they are non-smoking. So you can give the oral contraceptive because the risk it is very less. But here there is the chance of excess risk because the age is advanced and those women they are the cigarette smoker. So the probability of causing myocardial infarction it is more in the woman in their 40s and those who are cigarette smoker. So what is this? So this is called as the excessive risk. So this number which help you to identify which patient are risky, which patient are not risky. So accordingly the physician can take the decision and prescribe the medicine based on the age of the patient and based on the history whether they are smoker or non-smoker. I hope you understood the application of the excess risk as one of the statistical indicator. Okay, so I have done with today's session. We have studied almost the 4 to 5 methods in last 3 session of epidemiological study design, and I have used Pharmacoepidemiology textbook which is edited by the Brian L. Strom. It is 3rd edition. I have referred the page number 3 to 26 to gather all this information related to pharmacoepidemiological study. So I must thanks to the author of this textbook for providing wonderful information for the benefit of the students. Okay, I thank you. So thanks for watching my session. For more such learning, subscribe to my channel, and if you like my session, then do remember to give me a thumbs up. Give me some time. I will be releasing the quiz and attendance link in the chat box. So quiz and attendance link, it will be remains active just for 15 minutes. So you take note of this. After 15 minutes, you will not able to give this. So I will be closing the quiz and attendance link. So don't request me on the WhatsApp group that it has been closed. So I hope those who are present, you are listening this and you will be given quiz instantly.